Okay, I'm going to get started. I'm sure others will join us, but good morning, everyone. We want to thank everyone who's joined us live for our South Niagara Conversations series. Joining me is my co-host, Scott Lunn. He's the general manager of 105.1 The River and 101.1 More FM. Always a mouthful. Scott, how are you doing this morning?
Thanks very much, Dolores. I'm doing well. I think winter has finally arrived, so just trying to stay warm.
With a vengeance.
Yes,
I'd
yes.
say with a vengeance. I also want to give a shout out to Brian LaChapelle and his team at B4 Networks. They provide all of the technical support that we need for most of our programming. They're geniuses, and Brian is just supportive of everything we do. So Brian, good morning. Hope you're doing well.
Morning. Doing very well, thanks.
Great. Well, this past month, there's been so much happening in the U.S. We've watched here from the Canadian side. There's been some scary moments. There's been some inspiring moments, and there's been some change. So we've been watching, and we have lots of questions, and we think it's going to be a very interesting conversation. So Scott, who do we have joining us this morning?
Dolores, thank you. Yes, we've got Kory Schuler is with us, who's the executive director of the Niagara USA Chamber. Craig Turner, who's president of the World Trade Buffalo Niagara, and Kevin Jacoby as well, who's the owner of Six Squared Studios and also the executive director of Canada BW. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Morning.
Thanks for having us.
We've got lots of questions, lots of things to talk about. Obviously, the pandemic is at the top of mind right now. It's Monday was the 1-year anniversary of the first COVID case in Canada. Our beloved border has been closed for 10 months, so I'm sure that will dominate a lot of the chat today. And of course, there's been just a little bit of news in the U.S. in the last month. So why don't we start maybe with Craig, and then we'll go to Kory. Craig, maybe give us a bit of an overview of what's happening, and then Kory, you can talk a little bit more about what's happened locally. So Craig, I'll turn it over to you first and see just what the feeling is down there these days.
Thanks, Scott. It's very interesting. I mean, obviously January was very interesting on many levels here on the U.S. side relative to the inauguration. Even, I mean, election questions leading right up to the inauguration, and then all kinds of things that happened surrounding it, and then the new president, President Biden, off in a fury at the beginning with some executive orders that I think a lot of people didn't expect. So obviously watching everything very closely. Here on the border, I've got my Niagara Falls picture behind me here. Here on the border, we always say that we see things a little bit differently than Washington and Ottawa do, and a lot of our advocacy work that we do is really intended to get the decision makers in the capitals to understand what we see on a daily basis. So we see the border very differently. We see commerce across the border very differently. We definitely see tourism very differently and the needs for it. So the challenges surrounding the border, I think given the tone of the dialogue and the relationship between the U.S. and Canada the last 4 years, and I say the tone and the rhetoric and the dialogue because in the end we signed a historic free trade agreement among the three countries, so things did get done, even with a lot of pain and infighting in the background. But certainly everyone expected with the new president, the tone at least would change, and then there would be a little more of a buddy type relationship between the two countries. But one of the first things that happened was President Biden opened up his 14-day window where he wanted a plan for the border. We're going to get the border open. We're going to get the border working. And the very next day, the prime minister came out and said, no, we're actually going to lock down travel a little bit more than we even have it now, which I think caught a lot of people off guard. Those of us on this call, we follow this every day. So we've been watching the border. We know what's, I don't think, maybe I'll speak for them. They'll probably speak for themselves at some point too. I don't think anybody on this panel envisions that the border is going to open anytime soon, but we like the idea of having conversations. We like the idea of looking at solutions that may have been used in other places already too. And that's kind of where that's what we're working on a daily basis here.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Lots of interesting things coming down the pipe, and a lot of it seems like a lot of different opinions on both sides as to how this border is going to move forward. Kory, on more of a local level, what's the feeling? Is there a lot of fear? What's happening right now from your membership and the folks in the Niagara region?
I think right now what you're seeing is the fear of the unknown. As Craig kind of alluded to, the new administration, I think, has broken the record for most executive orders signed by an incoming president. And those orders are coming so quickly and so rapidly, you don't always have an understanding of how they're going to impact the membership. Some of the energy policies certainly going to impact. Obviously, we saw things with the Keystone Pipeline coming to a halt, so those have to be addressed. And while we're kind of sifting through all of that stuff, we're also, people forget that we're still dealing with a pandemic. I know, yesterday they announced that the first strain of the UK variant was found in Niagara County. So, that adds a new wrinkle to this whole COVID problem. And the businesses are concerned about, the mixed messaging that's going on here. So we're trying to reopen. If you've seen, New York State sort of relax their color zones, their orange and their yellow zones, but the numbers that we're all kind of following don't really coincide with the zones being relaxed. So, there's just some confusion as while we're happy to hear things are reopening, we're also getting messages from the federal side that maybe we should be wearing 2 masks, or, you are seeing these new strains. So people really right now I think they're just sort of shell shocked trying to figure this all out. And every day there's something new in the news. And it's hard for people like, Dolores and myself and Craig that have membership to keep everybody informed, because the minute we send something out, it changes the next day. So that's been a big difficulty right now.
Kory, I think, this is a public health crisis that has created an economic crisis. And so we're dealing with 2 huge issues at the same time. And we weren't prepared. I mean, who could have predicted? I think back to, almost a year ago, I was getting ready to attend your annual gala.
Yes.
I believe it was being hosted at the Seneca Casino, a big gala that you guys host every year. It's your signature event. I know that Kevin's been in attendance in the past. And, it really hit me when you called me just a few days before your gala, because I certainly can appreciate how much time, effort, resources go into planning those events, right? Like, they're huge. And you called me a few days before to say, they're telling us we have to cancel. And I remember laughing, saying, what? Get out of here. Come on. And you said, no, I'm serious. We have to cancel. And I remember hanging up the phone and I was in shock. And, I went out to talk to the staff and say, guess what? And we were all like, just shocked, because that doesn't happen. Like, that's major. But who could have thought that was the beginning of everything that's transpired? And we're not done yet. We're not done yet.
Right. Yeah. So January was the first year anniversary of it appearing. March was when things really in the US started shutting down, and the gala was one of the first events that was canceled. If you would have, asked me 10 months later where I thought we would be, never in a million years would I thought that this is the state of the world right now. And I don't think, even going forward, learning from that lesson, I think the one thing we all learned is predictability has gone out the window.
It's true. You can't really, plan for even tomorrow, because things change so quickly. So, the new variants are out, the one from Brazil, the one from South America. They're telling us they're more contagious. So do we plan for events happening again in the summer in the fall? Do we continue with, virtual type of events? It's really hard to know what to do. I think the thing is, you have to be flexible, and you have to be able to, I hate the word because it's been so overused, but you have to be able to pivot. Like, you
I
really
knew you were
have
going
to
to
be
say
able,
that.
you come up with another word, because I'm tired of using it, but it really is the right word. You got to be agile, and you got to be able to flip when the time is right. Kevin, you must be experiencing, a lot of the same with your businesses.
We are. So primarily that, so my hobby company, Six Square, and that we do e-commerce. So obviously there was a huge impact on there, and we started seeing courier services being inundated with extra, so they weren't taking on extra clients, delays and things going on. Even being able to put parcels domestically into the U.S. Mail system, that stopped in March. We haven't been over there for, going on 10 months crossing the border. With Canada BW, we do a lot with food and beverage, and a lot of these things rely on sales to restaurants and to bars, and it was devastating. You had people trying to pivot by trying to do hand sanitizer and the like. So we saw a lot of breweries, distilleries step up to the plate to do that. It was fantastic. The downside of that is when they started doing that, and it was a great relief to local businesses, we saw 4 or 5 months later, when the big boys got back into it, they got pushed aside. They lost the contracts, and it impacted them significantly, because all of a sudden they invested on getting these things done for the community. And a lot of times they were doing it at cost. That's something that's not really said a heck of a lot in the marketplace. And then all of a sudden now they have these huge losses because the stuff that they brought in to put out there isn't needed because the other people had contracts with Johnson & Johnson or the likes for that. I think the word, instead of pivot, we have to worry about is the word reasonable. And that's the challenge we're having on both sides of it. So what is reasonable expectations for the actions we're taking? At the beginning, we shut everything down and we saw significant surges. But politics is a popularity contest. They couldn't maintain that reasonable response to a pandemic, and we started opening things up in drips and drabs. And of course, we saw numbers go up higher and higher and higher. We also saw the idea of reasonable is, why are some rules made for some companies and not for others? Or why is it a big box store can sell batteries, but the local electronics store can't be open at the moment? These are challenges about being reasonable. And the idea too of reasonable is, as we gain more information from our scientists, that we have to expect that we're going to be changing what we do. And it's not because we were wrong, it's that we were more informed. So it's a huge challenge right now, trying to do that and stop the reaction, which we have this massive surge to the other side saying now it's fake, or I don't need to wear a mask, or I should be able to go anywhere I want to go for that, because people are just burnt out.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I know that on our side with our businesses, our members, it's almost been surprising, but they are very much on side with whatever we need to do to ensure safety first. So safety for their employees, safety for their customers. That's priority number one. And that's, you don't always get that, because sometimes businesses really don't want government in their business. And government has had to step up and lead and make some tough decisions. But we have found in some of the surveys that we've done that our businesses have been very supportive of that intervention. One example is the local mask bylaw. We did a quick survey to see how many businesses supported, a mask bylaw, and it was through the roof. They were very supportive, which did surprise me a little bit. What are you finding on your side? Are businesses responding in the same way, or is it a little different?
Yeah, so we've been essential service. So we've been open all the way through the pandemic, but we've had to make changes in how we do business to protect both our staff and to be able to maintain that flow of goods going through our warehouses. So we had to restrict access to the building. We had to put in a higher level of integrity to how we monitor sick days. temperature being taken on anyone coming into the building, making sure we have those paths. So people understand those situations and are working through them. We're adapting to what has to be done. And quite frankly, in that, maybe it's something that should have been done well before the pandemic. Maybe there should have been more controls put in place to protect everyone. So you don't have a situation where, well, Canada Post beginning of this week in that they had the major depot in Mississauga shut down, which has caused a huge disruption in mail service because they had an outbreak. How do we deal with that? How do we deal with the idea that our borders are still fluid, even being shut down, because we have trucks going back and forth? So Craig and I are part of ITCO as well. And so we understand that that's a necessity, that's an essential service. How do you treat those truck drivers that they don't have any stops to be able to go to the washroom? Do you allow them into the building to be able to have some dignity and be able to use it because they've been on the road for 8 hours? Or do you maintain a zero tolerance of having people coming into the building, have them wait outside in their trucks?
Right.
I think you have to use some common sense and try to figure out, how do we stop it? How do we maintain it, and but while still respecting the people that are part of our teams, be it in our company or suppliers or distributors for our company?
I think a lot of the protocols that we've now put in place will be with us for a long, long time. Kory, what are you seeing on your side with businesses? Are they embracing, protocols that have been mandated? Are they, what's happening on your side?
Well, I don't know if I would necessarily use the term embrace. I think they're accepting them
Right.
and embracing them are kind of two different things. I think one of the issues is nobody wants the blowback by not enforcing these. So it's in the business's best interest to enforce the mask mandate, social distancing, hand sanitizing, and safety, which is smart and which is needed to kind of, get these numbers back in check. Part of the issue is, and I know on our side anyway, the rules have been so convoluted and have changed so often that you get businesses that are either in trouble because they think they're following the rules and they're not, or they've just kind of lost sight of what rules they should be following. So we had COVID rules in place, then we moved to color zones. So, yellow, orange, red. A perfect example here in Niagara County. Now, Erie County is literally, a stone's throw away. Erie County went into an orange zone, which is a higher state of caution. Niagara, for the most part, was still in yellow. So a lot of the folks in Erie County just traveled to Niagara County to eat in restaurants, to get their hair done at salons. So it kind of created this issue of, well, wait a minute, how we're kind of pitting community against community. So it's been very difficult. And on a national level, you're hearing talk about things you never want to hear again. Not only do I not want to hear the word pivot, but you hear this phrase that it's kind of come back into our vernacular as rules for thee and not for me. So you have the people that are making the rules that are not following the rules. So you have, these gotcha moments where politicians are caught eating at restaurants, at parties, traveling around the country, traveling out of the country. And when that happens, then you see blowback where businesses now decide, well, we shouldn't have to follow those same rules. In New York State, there's been, and Craig, you can probably speak to this better than I can, but there's been quite a few lawsuits filed against the state government. And for the most part, the state government, I think, has either lost most of them or they've acquiesced before they've wound their way through the court system. So it's been this very interesting kind of time where, you have businesses that are really adhering. You have businesses that have swung that say, we're just over this. We've lost so much revenue and we're not going to be able to stay open unless we fight against these things. So, and Craig, you can probably speak a little bit better on that than I can.
Yeah, I think the lawsuits, and both Kory and Kevin touched on it. I think the prevalence of lawsuits and the fact that they are, let's say, getting results, whether they're winning the lawsuits or the changes are coming before the lawsuit is decided, speaks to the inconsistency. And I think that's the challenge. I don't think it's unique to New York or Ontario. I think everybody, as Kevin said, the rules are changing, and by the rules I don't mean the political rules. I mean the rules of the virus. There's new science coming out every day, and there's a lot of different different pieces of information that come out. But the inconsistency, I think, is what's making it difficult and leading to the lawsuits. And the challenge, and I wear a couple different hats. I run World Trade Center, I run ICO, but I also I own a small business here based in Tonawanda. And so I see everything through that lens too. The inconsistencies, just as Kory said, has left people kind of wondering. And unfortunately, it really manifested itself with these yellow and orange zones, because you've got restaurants and gyms and hair salons. You've got all these businesses that earlier in the year over the summer made significant investment to be able to continue to operate under the current set of rules. And then all of a sudden they're shut down. And they're like, oh my goodness, I now not only am I shut down, but now I'm out all the money that I invested. And yes, there were governmental programs to cover some of it, in some places, but and I kind of have a poster child, and that's a little bit of a pun because you'll hear in a second. One of the things, just as an example, in New York, if you go back to the original executive order for small businesses, the rule on masks is, if you're in a business, you have to wear a mask if you are inside and you cannot social distance 6 feet for 10 minutes. That's the rule. Okay. Now, what happens is when you go from store to store to store to store, you see a different poster in each window. Now, my challenge with that is when the Department of Labor, the State Department of Labor, makes a rule, a tiny little thing on their poster. Every business in the state gets that poster, and you have to hang this by Tuesday or else you're going to get fined. All right. So there's this level of communication. So here's something that I would argue is far more important than that little change on the Department of Labor board. And they left it up to the companies to do themselves. So you have everything from on one side, you have a store saying you have to wear a mask because I'm going to bash the governor. It's his fault. And da-da-da-da. On this side, you have to wear a mask or you're going to kill all of our clients. And then somewhere in the middle, and there's all different. There's a grocery store right up the street here that has two different signs with two different messages on it. There's a little stand-up triangle outside that says you have to do one thing, and then on the window it says something completely different, and it's very, very confusing. And this is what makes it, to answer your original question, are the businesses adhering? Are they doing what they're? Yeah, I think everybody wants to do the right thing. Nobody wants a case. I mean, it's a little bit different now when there's so many cases. Back to the summer when they were pinpointing this one happened there, this one happened there, but nobody wants a case coming out of their business. Everybody's going to do their part to do it, but they want consistency. They want to, as Kevin said, why can we have 150 people in Walmart, but I can't have 4 people in my small business? Those kind of questions have left a lot of people aggravated, and that's where you get into the, I'm just going to do my own thing, unfortunately, but that happens, and then we see a lot of fines and things. So yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, the rules seem to change, and again, it's a public health crisis, so that's to be expected. But I think businesses do want to do the right thing, and I think what we have to understand is when we eventually come out of this, and we talked a little bit about this on last week's podcast, people's habits have changed. Right. So you're used to doing things differently. We've all been housebound for the most part. And some people love that. Right. The whole couch potato. And some people don't. But people's habits have changed. And I think it's very naive to think that when, we come out of this, whatever that means, that we're going to flip a switch and everything goes back to, the way it was, and people are out there spending money and going to different businesses. That's not going to happen. And one of the big things, that we'll have to have in place is safety. Like if a business hasn't done the things that they need to do to make sure that their customers feel safe, feel secure, feel comfortable going to their place of business, they're done, right? So right now we have the opportunity for businesses to put those protocols in place, to look to the future. What else will I need to do to make sure that my customers are going to feel comfortable when I can invite them back into my facility. They have to be doing that now. And I think that's going to go a long way into getting people back, because it's not just going to be, a flow of people just dying to do whatever they used to do before.
I think it's on the personal side too, Dolores, and I agree with Kevin. He said something pretty significant, which is maybe we need to look at what we should have been doing all along. I mean,
Right.
there are things, people should be washing their hands. People should be covering their mouth when they cough. And yes, I understand that some of the rules might need to be changed, but if you're sick, you should stay home, whether you have COVID, the flu, or whatever. And sometimes the rules make it tough. The employer wants you to be there, they'll force it. I understand all that, and there is some conversations to be had around that. But the personal role that people take, and we were joking before the call started because Kory said that he gets claustrophobic at places like Disney. And I'm a huge Disney fan, and I'm looking at the thing. And personally, I'm not going to go back to Disney if I have to wear a mask all day. Obviously, our family's not going to do that because that's not an enjoyable vacation for us. I know many people don't have a problem with it, but when they talk about the social distancing, I'm okay with that. I've been to Disney many times and had thousands of people on top of me, and if they can keep some of those things in place, I think because I've had 3 separate trips where someone in my family got sick at Disney, and we were grounded for 3 days in the middle of the trip. So we see that, and we're like, oh, I see what they're doing with the X's on the floor and things like that, and we're like, okay, that sounds like something that would be worth keeping. So, but I think there is, as Kevin said, what should we have been doing all along anyway that's going to come out of this as best practices going forward.
And I think we have to be realistic too. Our businesses, especially being like with the chambers as well, is our storefronts have to understand why they should be open. They have to become experts in their field. They have to have a reason for people to choose them. We already start seeing pressures from online sales with Amazon or all the other platforms well before this happened. This just accelerated it. So we now have a situation where they have to figure out how are they vital to the market they're selling. If they're selling generic items that can be easily bought online and delivered the next day while we're having a glass of wine and shopping on our computer the night before, why do we want to now travel out to go there unless there's a value added statement given by that company of why we are going to them as experts in their field, or because it's a specific niche product itself? We can't keep on relying on that buy local thing and saying this is the right thing to do, because dollars speak, and some families may struggle, and we're going to do what's going to give them the most bang for their buck, the most reasonable way of spending their time to get these things done. So it's going to be very interesting, especially I'm old enough to remember consumers distributing sort of thing. So if you remember that, because I remember the biggest memory I have of them is the Star Wars action figures, because they were just coming out and they gave us a cardboard cutout because they weren't ready yet. It was for it, but those stores didn't have you browsing. You went in there, you filled out a piece of paper and put it in. So it's kind of precursor to what we've been doing on Amazon. It's just the manual approach to it. Right. Now the stores are doing curbside pickups and the like. So how do you differentiate? Why are they coming to pick up at your store? And those are the type of things that we have to help our clients, our companies figure out.
Yeah, that was before my time, consumers distributing, did you say? Yeah, before my time. But
well, it's just like Olson's store in Little House on the Prairie. So equate that to your childhood that way. All right.
I'll deal with you later.
What did we have? Distributors Warehouse. Yeah, Distributors Warehouse.
You do make a good point though, Kevin. I really hope that, right now, a lot of our businesses are, they're worried about today. They're focused on keeping the doors open today. And we really have to get them in a mindset where they're spending some time on focusing on what they have to do for tomorrow, whatever tomorrow brings. Because if they're not, when that time comes and the subsidies run out and the loans have to be paid back, they're not going to survive. And so I know that we've talked about this before, certainly at our chamber table, but I don't think we've seen the worst of it yet in terms of the fallout for businesses. I think we will see, you know, more business closures the end of 2021 and then really in 2022, because 2022 is when a lot of those loans, those government loans are due. And I think that's when we're really going to see the impact of this pandemic on our economy. I don't know what you guys are seeing on your side, Kory and Craig, but that's really what we think on our side anyways.
No, you're right. And businesses that aren't learning to adapt now, the best thing that you just said is it's not about today. It's what are you doing to prepare for tomorrow and next month and the next 6 months. You know, restaurants are a prime example. You know, that's a delicate business to be in anyway. And the restaurants that have really learned, that have really gotten down to a science, their online ordering, their curbside pickup, those will really be sustainable. The ones that haven't been able to manage that or don't offer something that is so outstanding that makes people want to still go there, they're going to have a difficult time. I mean, and I'm somebody that before the pandemic literally ate out 5 nights a week. I mean, I never ate at home ever. And even now, you know, it was weird. Okay, God, I got to start, you know, cooking again. I'm not doing that. So when I found the restaurants that I liked that really had a really good curbside pickup, especially in the earlier stages of the pandemic when we weren't sure what was really kind of going on, if I even had to go in to pick stuff up, I would not order from that restaurant because I don't want to have to stand around a crowd of people because we're not sure what's going on yet. Right. But now that places have ironed that out, those that have really been successful will continue to be successful. I think they're going to not necessarily see a lot of people in the seats, but they'll continue to do a good business on their online ordering. And that's what restaurants, that's what even offices now too. The smart thing to be, really the smart money would be, you don't need a large office. You don't need everybody behind a cubicle. Let people, like Craig kind of said, when you're, you know, we should have been doing these things all along. When you're sick, stay home. Well, if you're letting people work from home, right, that's not going to be so much of an issue. So they have to figure out what they want to look like a year from now. If you have not adapted, you're not going to last. And even in our own chamber world, you know, I don't know what it's looked like up by you, but the chambers that have really been there for their members and offered important information, helped with guidance on things like payroll protection money, disaster loans, unemployment, you know, all the government guidance, you know, for those of us that really stayed with that and really provided for our members, we're doing okay. I mean, for 2020, we had about a 10% drop in membership. So really overall, I'm okay with that. You know, I thought it was going to be a lot worse because in the middle of the year, things looked really, really bad. But the chambers that didn't offer that incentive to their members of we want you to stay, they're really struggling, and a number of them here are going to close because they just don't have that value added thing that their members were looking for. And so right now, as much as the vaccines are starting to roll out, even though there's been a lot of hiccups here in the US, but as we start looking for what this is going to look like, what the landscape will look like when this is over with, companies need to take this time now to not worry about today. They need to start figuring out what they want to be a year from now. Those that do that will be successful. Those that fail to do that are going to really struggle.
And I think it is really going to be a different landscape when we come out. I mean, I've been working from home. I know most of you have been working from home. Some of us have had a blend of both, you know, going into the office and working from home. And I think that moving forward, that's going to continue. I think that even our events, you know, when we have a Zoom meeting or a Zoom learning forum, first of all, the expense is minimal. Secondly, you get more people because there's no travel time. You know, an hour session is truly an hour session. You're not, you know, taking the 15 or 20 or half an hour time to drive there and drive home. You lose out on the beforehand chit chat and the after chit chat. And sometimes you want that, but sometimes you don't have time for that. So I'm finding that good or bad, we're able to do far more of these than we would have in person. And I mean, Craig, you said it so beautifully on Tuesday. We had our border series, the first part of a two-part border series that Craig moderated for us, and we had a snowstorm, and it was a binational event. And had that been an in-person event, guess what? We would have had to cancel, or we would have had minimal participation. So I think moving forward, I don't think it's going to be, all this or all that. I think it's going to be a blend of what we used to do and what we've become accustomed to doing in the last 10 months. Happy to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah,
Maybe I'm wrong.
Dolores, I'm going to take a different tack. Then I'm going to put my World Trade Center back on because Kory covered the small business side, but we are seeing that with our companies doing business internationally too. And I should mention for everybody that World Trade Center, we're actually part of the World Trade Center network. There's 330 World Trade Centers around the world, and we are unique among them in that we cover both sides of the border. We are a binational organization, and our territory actually runs all the way from Hamilton to Syracuse. But what's interesting is for the larger companies, the manufacturing, the distribution companies, they're in the same boat. They have to look and see, because global trade has changed. We learned a lot about the world in the last 10, 11 months, not only from, who's strong, who's able to respond to major challenges like this, but companies looking at their own supply chain. Are my resources too far from my headquarters and my plant? Are my customers too far away from my plant? How can I minimize the amount of strain on my supply chain that could be caused by this or whatever the next thing is? So companies have been adjusting themselves. I'm staying away from the P word that we all agreed not to use. Companies have been adjusting and looking forward and seeing what kind of, how they need to balance their ocean shipping, which has been very slow, and their trucking, and how much more should they be putting into a warehouse to hold on to right now. And Kevin obviously lives this every day, but last mile delivery is the biggest topic right now because it's all e-commerce. So, and there are just frankly not enough resources for that last mile. So everyone is looking for solutions. What's good is that the world is realizing it. We talk about all the time that people do not understand logistics and supply chain. They type their order into Amazon, and 2 days later it shows up at their home. But for the last 10 months, they've typed their order into Amazon and it showed up 15 days later. Some of them I got a present for my son that I ordered at the beginning of December. I got it 3 days ago. The question is why? Well, why is because the supply chain is disrupted, and it's given us at World Trade Center and at ITCO an opportunity to really talk to the public about here's why this happens. Here's why we pay attention to it. Here's why you should as well. And here's why we need more workers on the workforce side. So it's very interesting to kind of see the evolution that the manufacturers and the distribution companies are doing right now, because it's very, it started out at the beginning, started out very reactionary because it needed to. And I think Kevin would agree with me when I say that the reason that the world economy didn't just be destroyed was because supply chain worked. And people, the people that work in supply chain, that is their job to find solutions. So what was it? Toilet paper at the beginning, and then bicycles, and then building supplies, all these things that people all of a sudden couldn't get. You're starting to see the bigger picture. And now once that initial shock, the global supply chain kicked into gear. And, not only did they create solutions to maintain and keep the global economy going, but now it's, how is life going to look going forward is the big challenge that the global supply chain faces.
Yeah,
and our companies here in the region.
The main thing there is redundancy. We were always told to do just in time, because that puts the pressure on your supplier to store the goods and have it done so it's not on your books, your cash flow. We're always told you put all your eggs in one basket. So you just use FedEx or Purelator or the post office, the majority of your parcels, because that way you get the best discounts to spreading amounts 2 or 3 carriers. This year, that strategy didn't work. There's a great opportunity for small, medium-sized manufacturers and suppliers, because now people are saying, hey, I can't just rely on going to company A for all my widgets. I need A, B, and C. So that way, if one's disrupted or goes offline due to an outbreak or for lack of supplies, I still get some stuff from B and C. So there's some great opportunities for small, medium-sized businesses here if they do their work and get those things done. Same with supply chain. We're seeing now that we're going back to the idea of needing these nodes, these community-oriented spaces, so that everything's not just for Ontario, in Mississauga at a depot, that there's small depots throughout Southern Ontario, so that if there's disruption, you can divert things through to one of the other ones. So you may have a 1 or 2 day delivery, but you don't have a 3-week delay for a Christmas present like Craig talked about. I know we talked about that at Go About Those Things. We're talking about that at NIA. The Chamber's been talking about that. And I think that's where the value of the service organization is going to be, is being there and figuring out what the value add is now that we don't have the networking opportunities like we did before with our Business After 5 or other events. How do we reinvent ourselves so that we're still of value to the community? And there's a lot of value. I'm so proud of what the Chamber and the other groups I belong to have been doing. So we're pretty lucky in our area.
Sorry, go ahead. Okay, I thought someone was jumping in there. I just wanted to, just before we got to wrap up here fairly soon. I know everyone's got days ahead of them here, but one of the industries that we maybe didn't really touch on, we talked a lot about adjusting and distribution. That's all good things. Companies, businesses are doing what they can to adjust. But if I'm a small motel owner or a mini putt owner or someone like that, I don't know what adjustments can be made. What's the sense of things in the hospitality, or maybe just more so the tourism industry on that side of the border? Maybe we'll start with you, Kory.
Well, the tourism and hospitality industry has been just hit so hard this last 10 months. As things started to reopen, or as some of the, especially being here in Niagara, a lot of things are outdoors, the parks and trails and things like that. Those started to really become, sustainable, and they held their own. But the hotel, motel, Airbnb business, that's difficult, because you really have to do the job of convincing people that it's safe to stay in. And you have to be very on point, on brand. And even backtracking from that a little bit, you have to have people here first that are coming here to want to stay in a hotel or motel or Airbnb. So that's a difficult thing. I know our hotels here, the numbers have been down. And obviously with the Canadian traffic being almost at zero, that has really hurt the immediate border communities, because you don't have the Canadian traffic coming in, those that do the weekends, those overnight stays, which really during the non-tourism season are their bread and butter. It's hard. And, even with having a good message, if you don't have the people here, it really, it's kind of falling on deaf ears. So that's been a very, very difficult thing to try to navigate. It's been hard.
Been the same here. I mean, we're in lockdown right now, our second lockdown, full lockdown. So our attractions are shut down. Our casino has been closed since March. There's nothing here. It's interesting because we still do get calls from Americans who are asking about, where can I stay? What would you recommend? What attraction would you recommend? Where, would you recommend for me to eat? And, when our staff says, well, the border is closed, you're not going to be able to get into the country. They're like, well, what do you mean? Like, they just, I think the farther you are away from the border, right, the less sense it makes to you, or maybe the less you follow it. But I can't tell you how many times we get a call from an American who's just so mad at us because we were the ones to give them the news. So we usually refer them to Kory, and then we let you deal with them.
I just let the phone ring.
So
No,
we've,
but we saw that here too, Dolores. We actually saw when they had the travel bans from state to state, people didn't understand why, if they came from, the Midwest, if they came into New York, why they'd have to quarantine and COVID test and all those things. And you're right. The farther away you are, it becomes less of a day to day. Like for us, this is an actual tangible thing. I mean, the border's right here. We can see that it's closed.
Right.
When you get farther away from it, it becomes more of a theoretical, this border. Like people don't realize it's actually it's a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. What I will say is that, Niagara Falls, both sides, we are a world-class destination. And when the time comes, our businesses, our, operators, our facilities will be ready. They've been working so hard at making sure that, they've done everything they can to ensure that their facilities are safe. And when the time comes, they will be ready, and we will welcome anyone and everyone. So, and I'm sure, Kory, you are going to be in the same boat.
Well, and going back, we're all around the same, time frame, age. We're not that far apart in ages, where we can all remember crossing the border between the U.S. and Canada was just a drive.
Right.
You drove through, you waved to the person in the toll booth, and you went on your merry way. I mean, we all did that. So I liken this to really the effects of 9/11, where after 9/11, the border changed forever. There wasn't just that ease of traffic, whether it was commercial traffic, tourism, whatever it was. And, over time, there's still hiccups and people forget, but we adapted. And that's just what this is. This is just the new normal for us. Once this is over with, we will adapt. The border will reopen. There might be some changes for, a term, but we'll get through it like we did after 9/11. And, I think that's the takeaway from this is this is not a permanent thing. We will have an endpoint. We will get through this. It might take longer than we want, but we will get through it.
yeah, I'll just weigh in real fast on that. Our role with tourism, again, I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds because it's not our area, but we've had the conversations surrounding the border mainly with the tourism folks, and it's really two pieces. It's the tourism industry itself, the hotels, the attractions and things, but it's also the going both directions, the people that own property on the other side of the border and haven't been able to access their property, which is a huge issue. And I guess from our perspective, going back to what I said at the very beginning, it's getting the conversation started. And this is something that we have, and I know that sounds fluffy, but in reality, it's what needs to happen. Now we're having conversations at the institutional level, the business level. It's the governments need to sit down and figure this out. And we've got, you've got the two federal governments, you've got the state and the province have a role in this too, which we think is very important for them to be talking. And the more things get relaxed on, I know Ontario went back into more of a lockdown, but the more things get relaxed, the more you see opportunities for things that work. You saw the gyms saying, okay, well, the restaurants did this, we can do the same thing. And that opens up the door so now you're looking at, well, the airports are doing this. We just opened up here in New York over the past few weeks. They opened up rapid testing to let people into the Bills playoff games. Well, here's another technology that the state has said we trust this to tell us the real story, and we're going to move forward. So how do you now take those and say, okay, well, here's another application for it at the border. But it takes everybody sitting down with an intent to actually get something done. And like I said at the beginning, this has been, this is yet another issue that we and our advocates on both sides of the border that we've pulled together often have said on every topic. On pre-clearance was a topic, on even bridge infrastructure projects, going all the way back to Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative. Is we all see the border very differently living here within 50 miles of it than they do in Ottawa and Washington, and we are consistently trying to get them to see this local point of view, and that's been a lot of the focus of our advocacy group, on which all of you sit. So so that those will continue, and we'll continue to rope everything into that conversation.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, it's been a great discussion, and one that I'm sure we can continue for a long time to come as we work our way through this. Thank you, Kevin, Craig, and Kory, and Dolores. I will hand it over to you to close us out.
Okay, well, thank you. That was a great conversation, and Scott is so right. We could talk for hours, I'm sure, but we'll let you guys get back to work. So next week, we're going to be talking about the Niagara real estate market here in Niagara. It is a hot one right now, and it's been hot for a while. So we're going to be joined by Stephen Kanjar. He's the broker of record and president of Peak Performers Realty. Barb Scarlett's going to join us. She's a broker with Century 21 Today Realty. And Neville Kidd, who's the senior account manager with Desjardins. I'm interested in hearing their thoughts on what's happening in Niagara's real estate market right now, why it's happening, what it means to the community, and where they see it going. I think it's going to be another great conversation. So to all our listeners, send us the topics that you're talking about, because we want to talk about them too. Thanks again for tuning in, and everyone, have yourselves a wonderful day.
Thanks, Dolores.
Thank you.